Hello, I'm your judge for this month. My name is Tom Savage. Live in Saginaw, and I'm a member of the Cowtown Camera Club as well as the Fort Worth Camera Club. I've been involved with photography since I was 12 years old and have been involved with camera clubs and the Photographic Society of America since the early 80s. At the present time, I'm the Vice President of Competitions for Gulf States, and I have 3 jobs unpaid for Photographic Society of America. I'm the Nature Division Chairman, the Nature Division Exhibition Standards Chairman, and the Chairman of the Exhibition Standards Committee. And in September, I will lose all those jobs at PSA, and I'm going to be on the Board of Directors. And I've been entering PSA international competitions since probably the early 90s. And at the present time, I've about 1,500 acceptances and about 112 medals, and 28 of the medals were best of show. And I enter primarily photojournalism and nature with a few occasional pictorial prints. So let's get to the competition. The first category is beginners. Before we start, though, I need to say something about my judging. This month, shelter is the theme. I really do not like themes at all. I think they hinder people's photography, and I saw that in this competition. There's far too many people worried about the theme more than the photography, and it really harmed their photography. So consequently, I'm not going to worry about the theme at all and leave that up to the leadership of your club to decide if any of these are not theme-oriented. I'm more worried about the photography. So let's get to it. The first category is beginners. The first image with a score of 6 is cliffhanger. The problem there is that it's simply out of focus. The main subject, the snail, is not sharp at all. It would be obviously a much superior image if it were in focus. Next image, it is a hot summer. I got a score of 7. This is one that looks like somebody was looking for the theme rather than worrying about the photography. The baby is the center of interest here, and he's not sharp, and you can't see his eyes. The mother's legs is good framing, but the baby's head needs to be up, he needs to be in focus, and you need to see his eyes. The next image is called Solace by the Sea, a score of 7. This is another image that looks like it was taken simply to meet the theme. It's not very interesting, and it's a little too dark. There's a great scene behind it, the seashore and the surf. That's really nice, but the building is really, whatever this is very dull, and it's a little bit too dark. It needs to be brighter, and it needs to have something to say exactly what the building is. The next image with a score of 7 is location, location, location. It's a beaver dam, wrong time of day. Looks like middle of the day, and it's not in focus at all. A little bit of the right side of the beaver dam is sharp, but almost everything else is not sharp enough. It was either shot offhand with too slow a shutter speed, or there was some movement somewhere, but it just was not sharp at all. The next image, score of 8, called a storage shelter. I assume this is a boat in some kind of storage. It has good exposure and things are in focus, but it doesn't really do much as well as a photograph. It's a bad angle on the boat, and there's lots of clutter all over. Again, this looks like one that was taken simply to meet the theme as opposed to worrying about the photography. The next image, changing of the guard. This is 3rd place, and it's by Randy Ratzlaff. It's got good color. The uniforms are good. Things are in focus. It's supposed to be in focus. The light's real flat here. It's not a real exciting image, not terribly interesting. Although, strangely enough, the first thing I noticed was one of the guys that's coming out of the building is looking off to his left, and everybody else is looking straight ahead. Kind of makes you wonder, what is he looking at? I don't know how to make this better. It's not a terribly interesting image. It's got, again, a score of 9, but it's 3rd place. I don't know what kind of building they're coming out of, and it said changing of the guard. Well, it's not really clear what they're doing or where they're going. It's kind of interesting. There's a policeman guarding the guard. Next image with a score of 10, Eternal Shelter, and that's 2nd place in beginners by Leslie Johnston. Good leading lines, and technically it's okay. The tombstones, I assume those are tombstones, I'm not really sure, but they're all pointed down towards the main part of the cemetery. and so it has good leading lines going down there, and everything is exposed properly. It's not real interesting, but it's not too bad. I don't know how to make it better because of the subject matter. It's not real exciting, but it's second place. The next image, and the first place in beginners, score of 12, I'll Take Care of You by Kathy Lynn. This tells a story, which is what you try to do in photographs, is tell a story. It tells a story of this family, the mother and or the father, either one. I don't know which is which, and the chicks, and you can see the chicks, and everything supposed to be in focus is in focus. It would score higher if the bright leaves in the background were toned down a little. That would bring out the birds a little more, but the birds themselves are sharp and are not blown out. The white feathers are not blown out, which is good. The out of focus on the lower left is a little disturbing, but the main problem with it again is the bright leaves in the background. I would tone those down a little bit, and that would make the image a lot better. The next category is intermediate, and the first image with a score of 6 is Better Than Nothing. I have no idea what this is supposed to be, and I have no idea anything about even the theme of shelter. But it's not a particular interesting, and it's not terribly good photograph. It's like the two window panes have different subjects, so it's hard to know what I'm supposed to be looking at here. Anyway, it's not a great photograph, and it would just look like some attempt at shelter. The next image is called a score of 6 also, called Bee Shelter, and another situation where the theme took precedence over photographic quality. Middle of the day, not good lighting, the subject's not terribly interesting, and it was purely a way of getting the theme, which doesn't make for good photography. The next image, score of 8, A Place to Hide. Same situation. It was simply a way of providing an image that had something to do with shelter. It wasn't particularly appealing. I mean, you have a ceramic turtle inside of a seashell, obviously put together just to provide something with shelter. Not a good image, and it may meet the theme, but it's not terribly appealing. And the seashell was all out of focus too, which is distracting. The next image, score of 8, called Ready for the Tornado. Another case of putting together something that would meet the theme with not much concern about photography quality. If you really wanted to show that, you need to back up some way and get lower so you're not looking down at this lady, and you need to show more of what it is she's doing. And she's putting something, or putting everything together in some kind of a place of shelter from a tornado, but you need to see more of what it is she's actually doing. It just looked like a jumble of stuff right now. And again, if you're going to shoot someone, get a little lower where you're not looking down on them. Next image is score of 8, Fort Griffin Shelter for the Troops. Same situation. It's just simply a way of having a shelter without a whole lot of thought about photographic quality. Although this one has good exposure, and everything is in focus. Pretty bad time of day, looked like middle of the day. Nothing particularly interesting here at all. It just, again, looked like an attempt to get the theme without worrying about, is this a good photograph? The next image, a score of 9, called Relief. Again, this looked like just a way of getting the theme. The dog is in focus, and it's a good picture of the dog, but frankly, the telephone pole providing the shade is kind of distracting to be right in the middle of the image. And if you're going to shoot animals just like children, you need to get lower and not be looking down on the animal. Next image, score of 9, Shelter from the Storm. Great sky, but the rest of the image is too dark. Again, it's just a way of getting shelter theme. You need better light on the buildings. They need to be not as dark. You can see them better. Keep the sky, but just lighten up everything else. It would be a lot better. It still wouldn't be that great because it wouldn't be that interesting a subject, but it would be better if the exposure were better on the buildings and then the grass. The next one is a score of 12, and it's third place. It's called The Quiet Place by Lulu Warren. It's a little different to see a child look like asleep in a chair, but everything is in a good spot here. She's in a good spot. She's not dead center. The outside scene through the window is not blown out, which usually what happens when you shoot a picture inside that show you see a window. People frequently forget about that and it becomes too bright. Well, in this case, the window scene is okay. The room with the little girl is really too dark. It needs to be a little brighter, and she needs to be not looked down on. Get a little lower. You don't want it too low because then you don't want to hide her behind the arm of the chair, but it would be better if you were closer to her, the level of her head. But it is a different sort of image. The next image with a score of 13, called Under Mom's Wings by Ming Yang. If you want to enter this in a pure nature competition, you need to crop the bottom part off that has the man-made box in it, and then it would be much, much better from a nature standpoint. But in this competition, that doesn't matter. But you got good action. You tell a story again. You really need to tell a story in photographs, and it tells a story of the chick and the mother coming in. Time of day is not too good. It's in the middle of the day, looks like. It'd be better if it were late evening or early morning and you had more directional light. The mother's face is sharp, her eyes sharp. That's good. So it does have a stop action, and again, it's got a score of 13 and second place, so it's a good image. And the first place in intermediate is with a score of 14 is Sanctuary in Santa Fe. Now this really tells a nice story. We have the children on the right and the guy reading on the left, and very colorful. The reason I didn't give it a 15 is the distortion from the lens. I should have corrected that, and then it would have been probably a score of 15. But as it is, it's still a really good image and very colorful and does tell a story, which is what you're trying to do. So congratulations on that, of a very good image. The next category is advanced, and the first image with a score of 7 is construction. This has a good sky, good time of day, nice sunset or sunrise, either one, don't know which. But the whole front of the building is out of focus, and the center of interest seems to be that white cup to the right of center, and I'm sure that's not what you want. However, the building itself is not terribly interesting. Again, it looks like simply a way of meeting the theme. The next image with a score of 9, it's a boathouse. I'm not really sure exactly what this thing is he's got in his hand, some kind of it's not a surfboard, but I'm not sure what it is since I'm not a person that involved with the water too much, but it is colorful and it is in focus. The lighting's soft, but it's not a bad image, it's just not terribly exciting, and it's really hard to know exactly what he's doing except just putting it in the water. I'm not sure how you would make this any better, just the subject not terribly interesting. The next image, score of 9, hungry baby cormorant in nest. Well, first problem is that's not a baby cormorant, that's an adult cormorant. If you're going to have the bird picture, you need to have more of the bird instead of just his head. It had good possibilities if you just saw more of the adult bird, and if he had babies in the nest, it would be even better if you could see the babies. So either you're too close and you can't see in, or maybe back up and use a bigger lens or something that you could see better into the nest. The next image with a score of 10, called guardhouse. Actually, the guardhouse gets in the way of a pretty decent image. If you could cut the guardhouse out and just go with some of the stone walls and the cows and the pasture, it would be much more interesting. As it is, the guardhouse cuts off 2 cows right in the middle, sort of blocks the right side of the image. I think a different angle where you totally ignore the guardhouse and keep it out of your picture would be a better image, and just show the pastoral image of the cows and the pasture. The road doesn't help where it is, right in the middle of the picture. That's kind of a distraction, and it doesn't really fit the image. If you could move around to where you wouldn't see the road and avoid the guardhouse, it might be much a better picture. The next image, score of 10, called Historic Utah Church, Shelter for the Soul. Great sky and a pretty nice looking building, except it's tilted You need to straighten the building up, and you need to brighten the building a little. It's really dull. My guess here is that you darkened it down to get the sky a little darker, but you got the building too dark. So just darken the sky and leave the building alone, and brighten the building a little and straighten it up, and it would be a much, much better image. Next one with a score of 10 is I don't need no stinking shelter. Well, the problem here is the tree and the cows under the tree in the shade really are a big distraction. It would be a really nice image if you could darken up the sky and bring out the clouds a little and just have the longhorn all by himself out there. As it is, the cows in the shade under the tree really doesn't help at all, but the longhorn is the real image. The next image is score of 11. It's an honorable mention called My Shelter by Linfen Huang. It's not terribly exciting, but it does tell a story of the sheep with her baby nursing, and she's, I think, either inside or it's clouds because there's no direct light at all. Technically, it's okay. It's just not a real exciting image, but it does tell a story, so that's why I gave it honorable mention. Next image with a score of 11 called You Are My Shelter, O Lord. Third place by James Edward. This would be much, much better image without all the out-of-focus heads in the foreground. That's a great distraction, but it tells a story, what you're trying to do with photographs, and I don't know how to fix that unless you got up and moved into the aisle somewhere and got away from all the people. You might try that again sometime, but try to avoid all the people in the foreground. The next score of 12 is second place in advanced, called Home of the Future Kings by Ron Lin. Again, tells a story, male, female lion and their two cubs. Being a nature guy who's been to Africa about 7 times, I like wildlife and I like lions, and I don't mind zoo animals. However, this would be a lot better if you could avoid all the obvious zoo parts of it. One thing you might try sometime is crop this down to where there's nothing but the heads of the male and the female lions in it, because they're right together, and just make an image where you just have their heads and see how that looks. And that would get rid of the zoo part and maybe have a much better image. Although this one's okay because it does show the cubs and the whole family, and they're all technically good. They're all in focus and the exposure's good. You haven't blown out the grass. The dark is not too dark. So technically it's good. Again, you got second place. First place with a score of 13 is Shelter No More by Bud Barlow. This is really different and it's good. The only thing that kept me from scoring it higher was the blue light. It was kind of confusing. I'm not sure what's the point of the blue light. It looked like the light was from the inside of the shell, and maybe it was, but it was kind of a distraction, and I'm not sure what you would do with that except get rid of the blue light and see what it looked like. But there's a blue reflection off the egg itself as well as that shell, since eggs don't normally have blue, at least in the yolk or the white. That was a little distraction. But it got a first place and advanced. The last category is Masters. The first one is a score of 7 called That July Sun. This certainly looks like a case where somebody was looking for a theme, because first of all, everybody's facing away from the camera, and it totally does away with much interest. When you shoot people, you really need to be looking at their faces or their eyes, unless you have a very, very good reason for that, and this doesn't seem to be that situation. And then the sky is not interesting either, and the whole thing is just kind of flat in the middle of the day, and not terribly good photograph. Okay, the next image, score of 7, Not One More Step. I have no idea what the story is here. This is obviously a setup, or probably a setup, but I have no idea what you're trying to show me. Lots of clutter, but there's no particular reason for the things in the picture that are there. Why he's laying down, and you have things stacked on the steps, so it's not like that people go up and down that a lot. So it's terribly unclear why it's there, unless somebody just felt like that this was a shelter image. Next image, a score of 8, called Summer Heat. Again, this is just another shot of trying to meet the theme. She's got her eyes closed and looking up, and then she's underexposed a little bit and with an umbrella, but it doesn't look like it was really shiny, sunshiny outside because it's kind of dull looking out. It's the whole thing is a little underexposed. It doesn't look that bright. All in all, it just not a great photograph. It just looked like it's an attempt to meet the theme. Okay, the next image, score of 10, called Birdhouse. Again, this looked like an attempt to meet the theme. It's very colorful. I congratulate you in having a shallow depth of field so that the background is out of focus, as it should be. To make that really good, you need a bird in there somewhere. This looked like a decorative birdhouse as opposed to a real birdhouse that a bird would use, because the butterfly is kind of in the way of getting in the door. So to make that really good, you need a bird. The next image, score of 10, called Summertime in Vale. I think this image was taken because of the name of the bus shelter. Not terribly interesting. A guy sitting right in the middle of the image looking at his cell phone. There's nothing to attract your attention, to hold your interest, although the paintings on the wall are kind of interesting. Other than that, it's not a great photograph, but an attempt to meet the theme. The next image, score of 10, called Ready for Harvest. Very grainy. The sky is good, except for being grainy. And it looked like there's sharpening halos all around the tops of I guess it's corn or some kind of grain. Anyway, the sharpening halos all around the tops of the plants. The building is underexposed. The whites need to be brighter. Looked like you darkened it down to get the sky darker, but it made the building too dark, and also had the halos around the plants. So I would lighten the building and get rid of some of those halos around the plants. And I have no idea what the colorful thing in the middle is, but that does make it a little bit interesting. But it's just underexposed too much and got too much of these halos. Next image, score of 11, Relief Station. Nice black and white, although I think it's too dark. You haven't blown out the lights, which are good, but I think the darks are just simply too dark, especially in the building. It needs to be lightened up some. Not terribly interesting, but could be a lot better if you would work on the blacks to where they weren't quite as dark in the areas where they don't need to be dark. Looking inside the building through the crack in the door is black, and that's okay, but the rest of the building is just too dark and the shadows are too dark. The next image, score of 12, called Under the Milky Way. Good night shot. I really wanted to see more of the tent. I mean, you only had half of the tent lit, and the rest of the tent and the ground around it was dark. I think it would be much, much better if the whole tent were lit. The night sky is good. It would look like it was 30 seconds or so. If you get beyond 30 seconds, you start getting star trails, and these don't have trails, so it looks good. But if you try this again, make sure that your foreground is all lit, not just part of it. The next image, score of 12, called Under Big Brother's Wings. This is a little dull. I mean, it's really great in terms of being sharp and everything's in focus properly, even the far side of the wings, but they're a little dull. Darken it up a little much, lighten the airplanes up just a little bit, not too much, but a little bit, and they're properly positioned, and there's sharpening halos around the wings and nose of the F-16, and you might want to get rid of that, because on the dark sky back there, the little halos show up. The next image, score of 12, We Will Look After You. It looks like it's raining. I assume that's what that is, but and that's good. The problem with this is it's too flat. It needs to have more contrast, more punch to it. The parents and the baby are all close together, which is good. The focus is on the baby. But again, it needs a little more contrast. It's just a little flat. Okay, the next image is second honorable mention. The score of 13. It's called Wasp Shelter. Looking straight down on the wasp nest. Unfortunately, the sharpest thing in this is the egg right in the center between the wasp. The wasp closest to it on the top is sharp, and the others gradually kind of drift out of the depth of field. I know when you do close-ups like that, you have a very small depth of field. But other than that, it's really a good image, and the exposure is good. I just wish that maybe that the wasp were just a hair sharper, at least the one down below and the one over on the left. But it's a good image overall. And that one is by Jose Ortiz. And the first honorable mention, will you share the shelter? Score of 13. The maker is Charlotte Hasty. Very nice image. Very good sky. I love the sky. I think you could crop it off on the right somewhat because you push the horses right dead center of the image. You could crop it maybe out slightly to the right of that old farm equipment, and it would improve it a little better. And maybe lighten up the black horse a little, or at least the area where he's standing. It's not terribly exciting on the image and doesn't tell much of a story, but still the colors are really good, and the things that are sharp, and the sky is wonderful. The next image, third place, the score of 13 is Cave Swallow and Nest by Larry Peterborg. Most images, the rule of thumb in photography is don't put anything dead center unless you have a really good reason. Well, this is a very good reason to do that because of the holes on both sides, the nest on both sides, and it makes for a very balanced image and very good. And the swallow is very sharp. He's very nice. I would darken down the bright lit area right around the hole where the bird is sitting. It's a little bright and kind of blown out. But other than that, this is a very nice image. And different because most of these guys build their nest up high and they're hard to get to. The second place, score of 14, it should have been put in the shelter by Ron Hasty. Very good image. Also nice sky. Nice foreground. Everything is sharp in the foreground, and you have the middle ground is the barn and all the colorful rust, and then the background is the mountains and the beautiful sky. It looks like a sunset or a sunrise. Very nice, very good image, a nice color, and very well put together. And you can see the animals, I guess they're sheep, off in the distance. All the image has something of interest in it to draw people's attention. It's a very good image. And the first place is A Quiet Place with a score of 15 by Marie Hansen. And this is a very, very nice image. Not only do you have the sky done properly, but the building is done properly where you light painted the building and you had lights on the inside, which is good. So all of it was done very, very well. I don't know how you could ever make it any better than that because you've done a really great job. It was done long enough to not have star trails. Looked like they were just starting to do that, so it was probably 30 seconds or so, or maybe a little bit more than that. But everything was light painted perfectly. It's very good exposure, and the right things are sharp that should be sharp, and it's very colorful too. And also, this is best of show. Okay, thank you, and thank you for asking me to judge. I enjoy looking at all your images. And again, don't get wrapped up in the theme. Worry about the good photograph. And if it meets the theme, fine. But the number one thing is a good photograph where it's composition, subject, lighting, the technical parts, exposure, the sharpness, all that needs to be right. Not just because you got a theme, it doesn't make it a good image. Okay, thank you.